For over 2 decades since coming to power, Sultan Mehmed II waged wars across the frontiers of his empire. From the flat fields of Hungary to the mountainous terrain of eastern Anatolia, his armies marched from campaign to campaign, carrying the banners of Islam and the House of Osman wherever they marched. However, the Sultan's ambitions lay elsewhere, in lands where Muslim armies hadn't ventured in hundreds of years, Italy, the heart of the Catholic world. Before these ambitions could be realized, Mehmed II began to conclude the many wars that had occupied him over the last decade. In today's episode of our series on the Ottomans, we will discuss the fall of Theodoro, Mehmed's vassalization of the Crimean Khanate, the definitive end of the prolonged and bloody Albanian and Venetian wars, and the Battle of Breadfield. Do you know why thousands of people on YouTube and Patreon support us financially? Because they get history you won't find anywhere else. We release 3 new exclusive videos every week. Plus, they get perks like early access to all videos, voting rights on upcoming series and videos, access to our private Discord, our production schedule, and much more. Right now, 250 exclusive episodes are waiting for members and patrons, including from our series on the Eastern Front of World War II, Spanish War of Succession, the Punic Wars, the Pacific War, the Iberian Reconquista, the Russian Revolution and Civil War, the North African and Italian campaigns of World War II, Sicilian Wars between the Greeks and Carthaginians, and many others. By joining, you're not only unlocking rare content, you're also supporting the stories you love. Your help allows us to keep producing 3 free videos per week while paying our team competitive salaries and growing the channel. Join via the links in the description, the pinned comment, or by pressing the join button under the video. Thanks for making this possible. In the twilight years of his reign, Mehmed II began focusing on consolidating his power in the outer regions of his empire. After years of fighting on multiple fronts within his realm, the Sultan sought to stabilize his frontiers, while formulating new plans to expand westward toward the heart of Europe. The first region we will examine is the Black Sea, which the Sultan aimed to transform into an Ottoman lake. Nonetheless, many powers perched on the Black Sea coast would challenge these ambitions, including the principalities of Moldavia and Theodoro, along with the Genoese colonies of Caffa, Kerch and Tanna, and the Crimean Khanate. To fully understand the political situation, we must first turn back the clock. The Golden Horde was one of the major successor states of the Mongol Empire, emerging in the mid-13th century under the leadership of Batu Khan, a grandson of the great Genghis Khan. The Khanate dominated an expansive territory that stretched from the Carpathian Mountains and the Danube River in the west to the edges of Siberia in the east. Feared by various foes, the Golden Horde famously raided Eastern Europe for centuries, often extracting tribute to support its war machine, particularly from the minor Russian principalities to its north. In addition to being a significant military power, the Khanate played a prominent role in the Eurasian trade network. Situated at a crossroads between east and west, the state facilitated commerce along the Silk Road by providing protection to caravans and maintaining a stable system of weights and coinage. Cities like Sarai became bustling trade hubs, where goods from China, the Middle East, India, and Western Europe exchanged hands. This prosperity contributed to the cosmopolitan nature of the nomadic Khanate, attracting merchants, scholars, and artisans from diverse cultural backgrounds. By the early 14th century, the Golden Horde had abandoned its ancestral religion of Tengriism in favor of Islam under its ruler Uzbek Khan, linking the state to the broader Islamic world. However, following Uzbek's death, the state experienced dynastic instability and a rise in independence movements among its local governors and generals. With the authority of the Ulugh Khan compromised, the Golden Horde faced a series of significant military defeats against its northern neighbours by the second half of the century. Although the military and diplomatic situation somewhat stabilized during the reign of Toktamish Khan in the 1380s, Timur's invasion of the Khanate in the 1390s shattered any real chance for the state's recovery. Fragmenting like the Mongol Empire, the Golden Horde, now referred to as the Great Horde, was reduced to just the core lands surrounding its central capital of Sarai, also known as the Ulugh Yurd. In the early 1440s, one of Toktamish's grandsons, Haji I Giray, established a newly independent Tatar-led state in the fertile peninsula of Crimea and claimed the contested title of Ulugh Khan. Tracing their lineage back to Batu Khan and the great Genghis Khan himself, the Giray family aimed to reclaim the entirety of the former territories of the Golden Horde. In this quest for legitimacy, they confronted the Great Horde, and later the Khanate of Kazan further north. During the ensuing wars, the Garai family allied with the Grand Duke of Muscovy, while the Joji family partnered with Lithuania. Yet this balance between the two sides shifted with Mehmed II's conquest of Constantinople in 1453, which expanded his realm's influence over the Black Sea. Aligning himself with the growing power of the Sublime Porte, Haji I supported its military campaigns against the Genoese over the next 2 decades. With the death of Haji in 1466, a civil war erupted in the Crimean Khanate between the two sons of the former ruler, Nur-Devlet and Mienli. In their struggle for the throne, the elder Nur allied himself with Muscovy and the Great Horde, while the younger Mienli sought military assistance from the Tatar elites of the Crimean Peninsula and the Ottomans. After 2 years of conflict, Mienli had secured the throne, while his defeated brother was imprisoned in the Genoese fortress of Sudak. Although the Khanate appeared united once more, it faced another wave of instability in 1475. For many years, local Tatar governors, known as Tudans, had been granted authority to govern the Muslim population of Caffa and its surrounding lands by the Crimean Khan and the local Genoese consul of the city. However, after a dispute over filling the vacant office between the Khan and the Genoese, the Tatar elites of the Crimean Peninsula sought Ottoman intervention to resolve the issue. Among these elites was the influential Eminek of the Shirin clan, who, by the beginning of the year, had driven Mengle Garay from his capital of Kirkyer, forcing the Khan to flee to the safety of the Genoese at Caffa. Seeing an opportunity to expand his influence across the broader Black Sea region and restore order in Crimea, Mehmed II eagerly accepted the invitation and ordered Gedik Ahmed Pasha to set sail for the region in the spring of 1475. The Ottoman Grand Vizier led a large navy to Caffa and besieged the Genoese settlement. Caffa could only resist the invaders for 4 days, as the intense Ottoman bombardment proved too much for its defenders to withstand. With the Genoese consul executed and Mienli captured, Ahmed Pasha turned his attention to the remaining fortresses that were still resisting in the region. Like Caffa, the fortress of Sudak fell to Turkish forces after a brief siege, which also led to the capture of Nur-Devlet. The fall of these settlements was followed by the annexation of Kerch and Tana later in the year, thus ending the Genoese presence in the Black Sea. The notable fortress of Theodoro, located in the interior countryside under local Greek rule, was also besieged to eradicate the last vestiges of Christian power in Crimea. The Principality of Theodoro, also known as Gothia, was a small Christian state that traced its origins to the Empire of Trebizond, making it the last remnant of Eastern Roman civilization. Economically, Theodoro was deeply involved in regional trade. Although it lacked a significant port of its own, it maintained overland routes connecting to Genoese-controlled ports, such as Caffa and Sudak. These trade connections helped Theodoro remain economically viable, despite its political vulnerability. Influenced by Greek, Gothic, and local Crimean cultures, the Gabras family governed from their capital at Theodoro and maintained autonomy through close diplomatic relations with their more powerful neighbours. With Ottoman armies now at his gates, Prince Alexander Gabras prepared his capital for a brutal siege. Theodoro was ideally suited for defence, as it sat atop a steep limestone plateau, more than 1,000 feet above the surrounding plains, and was fortified with massive stone walls, towers, and natural cliffs that made a direct assault exceedingly difficult. It had successfully resisted attacks from the Tartars and Genoese in the past, and the defenders likely believed they could withstand another onslaught. However, Ahmed Pasha brought artillery and siege engineers with him, many of whom had been present in Constantinople during the 1453 siege. Even with this development, as well as limited supplies and foreign support, Alexander was able to hold out longer than even Constantine XI himself. For over 3 months, Turkish guns bombarded the capital, but were unable to penetrate the limestone plateau. Despite their courage and determination, the exhausted defenders of Theodoro were vastly outnumbered, and morale dwindled as food and water supplies ran low. By December 1475, the Ottomans had captured the city, either by breaching its defences or through a false retreat and ambush. Theodoro fell, and with it, the last vestige of Eastern Rome. With Christian power in Crimea coming to an end, Mehmed reinstated Nur-Devlet, but within a year of his return, his realm was invaded by the Great Horde. Although the invasion was repelled, the Crimean elites wrote to Sultan Mehmed requesting his deposition and the reinstatement of Mienli to the Crimean throne. By 1478, Mienli was released from captivity and regained the throne, but this time as an official vassal of the Sublime Porte. With Nur-Devlet fleeing to Muscovy, the Crimean Khanate was once again united under a single Khan, who now ruled as the Ottoman Sultan's appointee. In a single military campaign, Mehmed's northern border was secured from enemies, as Moldavia was also compelled to make peace with Constantinople by becoming a tributary to the House of Osman in 1480. Consolidating his power to the north, Mehmed II turned his attention to the wars with Venice and Albania to the west. Consequently, Turkish raiders once again penetrated deep into Europe. In 1476, the Venetian territory of Istria was set ablaze, and its population was taken into slavery. The following year, Omar Bey's raiders advanced into Venetian-held Friuli, where they defeated a local force near the Isonzo River and captured dozens of its officers. In the aftermath of the battle, the lands between the Piave and Isonzo rivers were pillaged and burned, with flames visible from the top of St. Mark's Basilica in Venice. Muslim forces possibly have never ventured so deep into the lands of Christendom, which sparked panic all across Europe. In 1478, another raid into the wider region was carried out, this time by Mihalolu Ali Bey and Malkacholu Bali Bey. The two Ottoman marcher lords continued the successes of the previous year by sacking the towns of Baveg, Tolmino, Kobarid, Versine and Valek. While his marcher lords were active deep inside Europe, Mehmed II began preparing for yet another military campaign, this time targeting Albania and its Venetian-held towns. The primary objective was the town of Shkodra, which had been besieged in 1474, along with the Albanian capital of Cruja. By 1478, the once formidable armies of the League of Leisure had dissolved due to a lack of unity under Albanian leadership. Additionally, Cruja had also been virtually surrendered to the Doge. Already blockaded for over a year by local Ottoman forces, the starving garrison of the fortress capitulated when the Sultan's 30,000-strong army appeared beneath its walls during the summer. With the anticlimactic surrender of the capital of Cruja came the conclusion of the formal Albanian revolt, which had initially ignited almost a quarter of a century earlier in the very streets where Mehmed now paraded his army. The bleeding ulcer that had drained the armies of the Sublime Porte had finally been vanquished. With Islamic banners now flying over Cruja, Mehmed's forces marched towards Shkodra, which was already under siege by Rumelian Beylerbey David Pasha. However, unlike the former Albanian capital, the Venetian stronghold proved to be a greater challenge for the Sultan. For many months, the defenders held out against a barrage of artillery fire. Reinforcements from Anatolia were also unable to alter the course of the bloody and prolonged siege. As winter approached, Mehmed and his main forces retreated, while Evrenisolu Ahmed Bey remained with a token force of 10,000. Exhausted after years of war with the Sublime Porte and with Shkodra on the brink of surrender, Venice was determined to end the disastrous conflict at any cost. At the end of 1478, Giovanni Dario, the secretary of the Doge's Senate, was granted unlimited powers to negotiate peace with Mehmed and accept all the demands of the Grand Turk. The terms outlined in the Treaty of Constantinople would prove disastrous for Venice. The Doge was to cede Shkodra, the island of Lemnos, and the mountainous region of Minor to the Porte. Moreover, Venice was to relinquish all claims to Cruja and Negroponte. All territories acquired by Venice during 16 years of warfare were to be returned, while Mehmed, in turn, was to restore all towns and territories he had occupied in the Morea, Albania, and Dalmatia. Lastly, Venice was to pay a grand installment of 150,000 golden ducats over the subsequent two wars, with an additional 10,000 ducats as the new annual tribute for securing trading rights within Ottoman territory. With Venice securing an expensive peace for itself, the last remnants of resistance in the Balkans against the Ottomans were left to their own devices. The remote lands of the Despotate of Epirus, under the rule of Leonardo III Tocco, had been slowly stripped away by the armies of the Sublime Porte. In 1449, the capital of Arta fell, followed by Anglo-Castron in 1460 to Turkish raiders. The Ottoman-Venetian War of the next 2 decades had been an opportunity for Leonardo to regain these lost lands, and so he decided to align himself with the Doge. Nevertheless, with the end of the war, Epirus now lay open to an easy conquest, as Mehmed wished to use its domains for his future plans against Western Europe. In 1479, Gedik Ahmed Pasha invaded the Despotate at the head of a large fleet and captured its capital of Vonitsa, along with the islands of Lefkada, Cephalonia, and Zakynthos. As a result of the sudden Turkish invasion, Leonardo and his officials fled to Taranto, thus officially putting an end to the despotate. With all of Albania now under his direct control and peace with Venice secured, Mehmed II began preparations for a new offensive aimed at Western Europe. Nonetheless, before he could proceed, the Sultan had to confront one last front against a foe he had yet to defeat, the Kingdom of Hungary. By the summer of 1479, Ottoman raiders had resumed their attacks and pillaging of King Matthias Corvinus's lands. In swift and brutal assaults, the towns of Nedelice and Ljutomer were set ablaze, along with the fields and villages along the Drava River. Despite the devastation, these incursions were merely the beginning of a significant Ottoman offensive into the region, as in the town of Smederevo, a grand Turkish force was being assembled. With a total strength of approximately 15,000 to 25,000 men, the army, led by Mihalolu Ali Bey, crossed the Danube from Vidin, where they were joined by 2,000 allied Wallachians led by Basarab IV. The Wallachian voivode had usurped his cousin, Basarab III, 2 years prior, with the help of Stefan of Moldavia, but had since then knelt to Ottoman vassalage. After the two armies merged, Ali Bey set his sights on the lands of Transylvania, with the objective of seizing the rich deposits of gold, silver and salt in the local region. However, the main Ottoman objective of the campaign was to consolidate their influence south of the Carpathians, thereby preventing Hungarian intervention in Wallachian politics, as had been done after the Battle of Valea Alba 3 years prior. By the fall of 1479, the Ottoman army was on the move. As they plundered their way to the town of Oreshti, Ali's men filled their wagons with abundant spoils and captives. However, as he was preparing to start his return march to Wallachia, the Ottoman marcher lord heard news of an incoming enemy host, and so prepared to make a stand at the town of Shibot. By October 13th, Voivode Stefan Batory of Transylvania, leading a host of 25,000 to 30,000, composed of Hungarians, Romanians, Transylvanians and Serbs, arrived at the gates of the Turkish camp, situated on the plain of Breadfield near Shibot. Seeing the foe across the plain, Ali Bey marched out with the army and began preparing for battle. The Battle of Breadfield had just begun. The Ottoman army was predominantly composed of light Akinjer cavalry, accompanied by their Wallachian allies, led by Basarab IV in the rear. The centre was commanded by Hasanolu Isa Bey, the left by Makacholu Bali Bey, and the right by the leader of the entire army, Mihalolu Ali Bey. On the Hungarian side, Voivode Batory commanded from the centre of his army, which consisted of his retinue of 8,000 Transylvanian infantry and cavalry, as well as a small contingent of Wallachians, led by the deposed and revenge-seeking Basarab III. On the left flank were stationed 10,000 Hungarians, led by Paul Knizi, who was accompanied by Seke light infantry in the rearguard. On the right flank were stationed the Transylvanian Saxon troops, led by Georg Hecht, comprising 4,300 infantry and 700 light cavalry. Accompanying them were 900 light Serb cavalry, led by despot Vuk Grigorovic and Dimitar Jakšić. After a series of inspiring speeches from the leaders of both armies, the battle began when Hecht charged into the Ottoman left. However, after much bloody melee and taking heavy casualties, the Saxons and their Serbian and Romanian allies were forced to retreat, as Bali Bey's horse riders proved too great a challenge to overcome. Meanwhile, another bloody melee between Batory and the Ottoman centre of Isa Bey took place, but during the heavy fighting, the voivode's horse was killed under him, thus severely wounding his thigh. With their commander taken out of action and the Turks breaching their lines, it seemed like all was lost. Despite the circumstances, Batory returned to the battlefield, an action later celebrated by European chroniclers. He began making desperate efforts to counterattack and push back the Ottoman advances on his centre and right. A long melee continued, as many from both sides fell on the plain of Breadfield, where the sounds of swords and screams echoed throughout the battlefield. It was during this critical counterattack that Isa Bey was knocked off his horse and killed, causing a great panic in the Turkish army, resulting in their rout. Now the army of Ali Bey watched in confusion and horror as they too began retreating down south, seeing that the day was lost. With the Ottoman right now withdrawn from the battle, Paul Knizi's Hungarians and Seke infantry surged forward and began circling around the now collapsing Ottoman centre. Many Akinjirs were killed in this charge, which saw the Turkish camp plundered and captured slaves freed. After 5 grueling hours of combat, the Battle of Breadfield came to a bloody close. While Batory's army had lost well over 3,000 men during the battle, around half of the Turkish host lay dead, wounded, or captured alongside their plunder. Like Hunyadi's famous defense of Belgrade back in 1456, the victory at Breadfield was celebrated throughout Hungary and wider Europe, and it marked a rare occasion in which the Ottoman army was defeated in battle. However, while the remnants of Ali Bey's shattered army regrouped in Wallachia, new pressing matters had emerged back in the Ottoman capital. Breadfield was a significant setback to Turkish expansion in the Balkans, but Mehmed's true ambitions lay across the Adriatic in Italy. Since the famous conquest of Constantinople, the Sultan had always eyed the lands where the Roman state was born. According to him, the new red apple was ready to be plucked, just as the old red apple had been back in 1453. In the next episode of our series on the Ottoman Empire, we will examine the last years of Sultan Mehmed II and his invasions of Italy itself and the island of Rhodes. To ensure you don't miss that and many other historical videos, make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our patrons and YouTube members can watch more than 200 exclusive videos. Join their ranks via the link in the description or by pressing the join button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.